Angels. The supernatural spiritual beings mentioned in the Bible and other ancient literature have long held a fascination to many. This is especially true of the few angels that are named. In the Bible, the name of one is Michael, the only one in the Bible called an Archangel. It is Jehovah's Witnesses' contention that Michael is the heavenly name for Jesus Christ, making them one and the same. This video will present that case by first looking at the biblical description of angels, and then the many parallels between Jesus and Michael. Biblically, the literal meaning of the Greek and Hebrew words translated as angel is messenger, whether that be a spirit being living in the heavens or a human messenger. For example, Rahab looked after the 2 human spies sent by Joshua to Jericho. When this account is related in James chapter 2, the Greek word used is angelos, which is generally understood as messenger in most Bible translations. When referring to a spirit being, such as when Gabriel was sent to visit Mary before Jesus was born, the word is translated as angel. The term Jehovah's Angel or the Angel of the Lord is used frequently in the Bible, and many commentators believe this to be Jesus in his pre-human existence. One of the most famous examples is that of Moses at the burning bush. Moses is spoken to by God, who promises to rescue the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. However, notice the wording. In verse 2, we are told that Jehovah's angel appeared in the bush, and then in verse 4, it is God who talks to Moses from the bush, and verse 6 says that he is the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, before going on to say how he intends to save the Israelites from Egypt. Here the angel is speaking for Jehovah God in the first person. Many may wonder if the angel is being presumptuous, or even if the angel is Jehovah. Later on in the Exodus account in chapter 23, when the people were being led away from Egypt, Jehovah sent an angel to guard the people and give them instruction. Of note is that God's name was within the angel, or as some translations word it, the angel is God's representative. So the angel is not being presumptuous here, but is representative of Jehovah and has the authority to speak in the first person for Jehovah, because Jehovah's name is within him. Indeed, it cannot mean that the angel of Jehovah is literally Jehovah, because as Exodus chapter 33 and other scriptures confirm, no man may see God, otherwise he will die. It's no surprise, therefore, that the Bible uses words such as gods to describe angels. For instance, in one of King David's Psalms, in saying how man was made a little lower than angels, the term gods, or Elohim, in Hebrew is translated as angels, angelos in the Greek Septuagint, which is used in many Bible translations. Outside the Bible, in other ancient Jewish literature recovered as part of the Dead Sea Scrolls from the Qumran caves in 1940s Palestine, a section of the Songs of the Sabbath, also known as the Angelic Liturgy, was found. Estimated to have been written around 100 BCE, the texts invoke lofty imagery of angels, godlike beings, and intense descriptions of the heavenly throne. The Song of the Seventh Sabbath contains multiple references to angels as being gods and giving praise to God, as well as calling them divine spirits. These fragments found in Qumran Cave 4 confirm by the type of language used the view the ancient Jews had of angels being gods. Representing and being called God happened to Moses in Exodus chapter 7, where God asked Moses to take a message to Pharaoh to release the Israelites and announced incoming plagues. Jehovah says, "I have made you God to Pharaoh." Moses was here operating as a mouthpiece for God, hence had authority from God in representing him. Indeed, as D.S. Russell in the Method and Message of Jewish Apocalyptic says, there is ample evidence to show that the Old Testament conception of monotheism was held in conjunction with a belief in a spiritual world peopled with supernatural and superhuman beings who, in some ways, shared the nature, though not the being, of God. The concept of one's representing God and being likened to God in some way is well precedented in Scripture and other ancient Jewish literature, and this is also the case for Jesus. In the Gospel of John, Jesus is called the Logos or Word, being the mouthpiece or spokesman for his Father. Many therefore conclude that Jesus is the angel of Jehovah in the Exodus and other similar passages in the Bible. This is backed up by many commentators on the Apostle Paul's words in 1 Corinthians, where describing Moses leading the people out of Egypt, he identifies the angel that led the people through the Red Sea, that the rock mass that followed them was the Christ. Similarly, other commentators have highlighted the parallels between Jesus and the angel of Jehovah in the Exodus account, who had Jehovah's name in him, with the account in the Gospel of John, where Jesus said he had been given God's name. Added to this are the more explicit references to Jesus being an angel. The famous prophecy about Jesus in the book of Isaiah as being the coming Messiah, who would be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. The Greek Septuagint, which was the first translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, and is in Greek, translates this passage using the term messenger of the Great Council, using the Greek word angelos, meaning angel or messenger, applying it to Jesus. Similarly, the Greek Septuagint rendering of Malachi chapter 3 and verse 1, prophesying John the Baptist preparing the way for Jesus, says that Jesus would be the messenger of the new covenant. Hence, as the Darby translation shows, Jesus therefore can be rightly called the angel of the new covenant. This type of wording completely aligns with what Jesus said of himself, that he came to speak what his Father told him to speak, fulfilling this role of a messenger. Later on in the Bible, the Apostle Paul seemingly calls Jesus an angel in his letter to the Galatians. Paul here is expressing his gratitude for the hospitality he received when he was ill, and says he was not despised but received like an angel, like Jesus. As Bart Ehrman points out in referencing Susan Garrett and Charles Geishen's work, this grammatical structure of but as is used elsewhere by Paul, and when he does so, the two groups or individuals after each as are being paralleled, and hence one being in the group of the other. In these examples, men of flesh being equivalent to infants in Christ, and persons of sincerity equivalent to persons sent from God. Indeed, as Bart Ehrman summarizes, the verse is not saying that the Galatians received Paul as an angel or as Christ. It is saying that they received him as they would an angel, such as Christ. By clear implication, then, Christ is an angel. This is perhaps not surprising, as the Interpreter's Dictionary under the heading The Messianic Expectation in Late Judaism says, "The figure of the Son of Man was moreover in accord with the otherworldly universal tendencies, as that of a pre-existent heavenly angelic being who, at the end of time, will appear at the side of God as judge of the world." Not only was this the case with the Jews, but there is additional commentary from the early church fathers. For instance, Clement of Alexandria, a theologian and teacher, who taught well-known church father Origen, in his writing the instructor says, "Formerly the older people had an old covenant, and the law disciplined the people with fear, and the word was an angel. But to the fresh and new people has also been given a new covenant, and the word has appeared, and fear is turned to love. And that mystic angel is born, Jesus." Here Clement is clearly twice called Jesus an angel. Another early church father, Melito, the bishop of Sardis, speaking of Jesus said, "Who was the fashioner of man, who was all in all, who among the patriarchs was patriarch, who in the law was the law, among the priests chief priest, amongst kings governor, among prophets the prophet, among the angels archangel, in the voice the word." Melito here is clearly linking Jesus to an archangel. The question does need to be asked that if Jesus is an angel, then what kind of angel is he, and what would he do? In the Gospel accounts, when Jesus got off a boat at the Gerasenes, he met a demon-possessed man called Legion, who said, "What do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" The demons knew a time had been appointed for their judgment, and in the parallel account in Luke, they begged Jesus not to send them to the abyss. In the book of Revelation, John says it's an angel that has a key to the abyss, and it is Jesus who has the keys to Hades. In Revelation chapter 9, this angel is named Abaddon or Apollyon, meaning destroyer, and is said to be a star fallen from heaven, leading many to think Abaddon is a demonic angel. However, this is a mistake. It wouldn't make sense for a demon to banish the devil. Indeed, as Jesus said, "How can Satan cast out Satan?" The book of James tells us that one is able to be a lawgiver, judge, to save and to destroy, and John tells us that God has given judgment to the Son. Remembering that the angel of the Lord, identified by many as Jesus, was responsible for slaying 185,000 men in one night, it would certainly make sense for the angel of the Lord to be referred to as a destroyer. Combine this with having the key to the abyss and the link to Jesus, the case for the angel Abaddon being Jesus is strong. Michael appears 5 times in the Bible. The majority of the time he is mentioned in the prophetic visions of the book of Daniel and the final book of the Bible, Revelation. There's one additional use of the word Archangel without a name in 1 Thessalonians, and as we shall see, they contain very strong parallels to Jesus. The first parallel is the title of Prince. As well as including details about the life of Daniel and his time in Babylon, the book of Daniel includes visions of future events involving power struggles between different kingdoms, and it's here that we see visions of Michael, who in chapter 12 is called one of the chief princes, and he comes to help a lesser angel who was opposed by the prince of the kingdom of Persia. In Daniel chapter 12, Michael is called the Great Prince. As mentioned earlier in the prophecy of the Messiah in Isaiah, the term prince as Prince of Peace and a princely rulership is applied to Christ. Also notice who Michael is a prince of. He is described as being a prince of Daniel's people, which would be Israel. As already mentioned, 1 Corinthians makes the connection between Jesus and the angel of the Exodus leading the Israelites, creating another parallel between Jesus and Michael. Some, however, raise the objection that this cannot be Jesus, as Michael is only described as being one of the chief princes, meaning that Michael is not unique in contrast to Jesus, who is. However, this argument falls down quite quickly. In Daniel chapter 8, God is also described as being a prince, in being the prince of the host and prince of princes. In addition, when we think of chiefs within a business organization, there are many with the job title of chief, such as the chief financial officer or a chief operations officer, and these will be managed by the chief executive officer. So in a similar way, just because there may be many princes or many chiefs, it doesn't mean that they have to be of the same rank. Next, they both become kings. Also in chapter 12, we are told that Michael will stand up. This terminology to stand up is used other times in Daniel's prophecy, and those standing up are said to be kings, where they are stepping up and becoming king, or acting in some way in their capacity as king. A few chapters earlier in Daniel chapter 7, a prophecy about the march of the world powers, at the climax of this prophecy, someone like a son of man was given rulership and dignity and kingdom, a clear description of the Son of Man or Jesus becoming king. This kingdom is made even more explicit in Revelation chapter 11, describing Jesus' kingdom reigning forever and ever. Then there is the primary role Michael and Jesus play during the Great Tribulation. Daniel chapter 12 says that when Michael stands up, there will be a time of distress. When Jesus was asked by his disciples what the sign of his coming and the end of the world would be, Jesus spoke of a great tribulation, an obvious overlap with the time of distress and Michael in Daniel's prophecy. The next parallel between Michael and Jesus is the authority they both have over the angels. The Revelation reference to Michael is a vision describing a battle in heaven, and Michael is described as having his angels. Similarly, in relation to Christ, he is mentioned several times in the Bible as having his angels that he sends out, or that he is revealed from heaven with them. The fact that his angels is applied to both Jesus and Michael suggests they are the same. They also both use their angels to battle against Satan. The battle in heaven in Revelation is against Satan, here depicted as a dragon, to defeat him and hurl him and his angels to the earth. We also find a few chapters later, in the vision of the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse, the rider of the white horse, widely recognized as Jesus, then does battle with the kings of the earth where Satan is. As Matthew Henry's commentary says, the parties Michael and his angels on one side, and the dragon and his angels on the other, Christ, the great angel of the covenant, and his faithful followers, and Satan and all his instruments. As said earlier, all of this links to the time of distress mentioned in Daniel's prophecy. Indeed, all of this links back to the prophecy in Genesis, foretelling the seed of the woman was going to crush Satan's head. Being hurled out of heaven was the first stage of that destruction, or crushing of Satan's head, carried out by Michael and his angels in Revelation chapter 12, the parallel between Jesus and Michael being clear. Jesus is also described as having the voice of an archangel. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul describes the resurrected Jesus descending from heaven with a commanding call, with an archangel's voice, and with God's trumpet, and that those dead in union with Christ will rise first. If Jesus wasn't an archangel and was superior, then it wouldn't make sense for him to be speaking with an archangel's voice. If someone today was described as singing with a tenor's voice, this would be understood to be a tenor. Some, however, object to this understanding, claiming that Jesus is being heralded and is descending being accompanied by an archangel's voice, a commanding call, and a trumpet blast. However, this ignores the 2 parallels in John and Daniel describing the resurrection, where in John it is at hearing Jesus' voice that the dead rise, and then in Daniel which links the time of Michael standing up to the dead rising. The overlap in these accounts is obvious. It's one voice in the singular that is used both for Michael and Jesus, hence they are one person. Another objection put forward for 1 Thessalonians is that if Jesus is the archangel, then he must also be a trumpet. This is false reasoning. Jesus is not the archangel's voice, so he is not the trumpet blast, but it is consistent for Jesus to be given the trumpet from God and to be the one making the symbolic trumpet blast. Next is that there is only one archangel mentioned in the Bible, and Michael is the only one ever referred to as an archangel. The 2 references to the archangel in the Bible are in 1 Thessalonians and Jude, where both times the word for archangel, meaning chief or principal angel, is in the singular. This seems to imply that there is but one whom God has designated chief or head of the angelic host. However, some do object to this by saying that other ancient literature talks of more archangels, and that in the case of Jude it's referencing the book of Enoch, a non-biblical book which talks of 7 archangels. However, this argument is rather weak. As in the case of the chief princes in Daniel, there is no reason that even if there were more than one archangel, they couldn't be subordinate to Michael, and this is in fact reflected in much of the ancient literature. As Darrell Hannah in Michael and Christ says, the Qumran sect adopted the tradition of Michael as protector of the righteous in Israel, highest archangel, a military leader of the heavenly host. The rabbis spoke of Michael as the priest in the heavenly sanctuary and the greatest of the angels. Regarding parables in the later work The Shepherd of Hermas, often referred to as the book that almost made it into the Bible, Hannah adds, as many interpreters have recognized, the many parallels between these 2 parables demonstrate that Hermas intended Michael to be understood as the Son of God. As for Jude quoting from the book of Enoch, a book that includes many archangels, it is also claimed that Jude cites the Assumption of Moses. Even if these facts are true, the Bible often quotes other writings or figures that are not viewed as part of the inspired Bible canon, an obvious example being Paul in the Acts of the Apostles, who cites non-Christian poets. This isn't because Paul believes the poets to be inspired, instead he merely uses them to support his point. Jude verse 9 tells us that Michael was disputing with the devil over the body of Moses, and that Michael did not presume to bring a slanderous charge against the devil, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." Opponents say this rules out Jesus being Michael, and Michael here couldn't rebuke Satan, but Jesus did rebuke Satan in the Gospel. For instance, in Matthew chapter 17, a boy was possessed with a demon, and Jesus rebuked the demon, and the boy was instantly healed. However, this objection is easy to answer. The parallel account to the Matthew text in Mark, the disciples asked Jesus why they were unable to expel the demon, and Jesus said that they needed to pray, indicating that the rebuking and healing of the boy was done not by his own authority, but as a result of his prayer. Indeed, the link between Jude verse 9, where Michael is disputing with Satan, and Zechariah chapter 3 verse 2, which talks of the angel of Jehovah or angel of the Lord, taken by many to be a pre-human Jesus, talking to Satan, where he uses the same wording of, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan." So Michael and the angel of the Lord, likely Jesus, say the same thing. Far from proving that Michael isn't Jesus, it points to the fact that he is. The final point is that Jude verse 9 says that Jesus did not presume to give a railing accusation, not that he wasn't able to. Indeed, this passage shows that Michael or Jesus didn't go ahead of the time appointed to deal with Satan, as the account of Jesus at the Gerasenes shows this time had not yet come. As we have seen, the many parallels between Michael and Jesus are strong, and the idea that they are one and the same cannot easily be dismissed. They are both princes. They both have a connection to Israel. They become kings. They have authority over the angels. They both do battle with Satan. They play a significant role during the Great Tribulation. There is only one archangel mentioned in the Bible, and Jesus is described as speaking with an archangel's voice, and that voice is involved in raising the dead, and neither are presumptuous but say for Jehovah to rebuke Satan. With all these strong parallels pointing to Michael being Jesus, it's hardly a surprise that there are and have been many scholars who make this connection. For instance, the influential Protestant reformer John Calvin, also the former of the Methodist Church John Wesley of England. John Gill, a well-known Trinitarian scholar, in his exposition of the entire Bible, makes the Jesus-Michael connection. These are just a few examples. Many, many more are included in the video description. However, no discussion of Jesus being Michael the Archangel can be complete without examining Hebrews chapter 1. Verses 5 and 13 specifically ask to which angel did God ever say, "You are my son, and sit at my right hand." Many contend this excludes Jesus from being an angel. However, the text nowhere states that Jesus is not an angel. In fact, the text shows that Jesus is an angel, albeit an exceptional one. Further to this is the language used. With him being the archangel or the chief or principal angel, this would set him apart from all the other angels, and the Bible often uses wording in this way. For instance, in Luke, when Jesus is relaying a parable, he says, "Look at the fig tree and all the trees." Here the fig tree is a tree, and so it's included in all the trees, as well as being called out as special for the purposes of Jesus' parable. It's the same for Jesus and the angels. In a similar way in the Psalms, where Jehovah is talking to human judges, he says, "Like men you shall die, and fall like any prince." If humans were to die like men, this may look like it means these judges are not men, but this is clearly not the case, and the psalmist is distinguishing them from ordinary men. The same for the Hebrews, where Jesus can be said to be distinguished from any of the other angels. Indeed, as Hebrews asks, to which of the angels did God say these things? The answer? To the angel, Jesus.